Church of New Beginnings.
Good morning.
And if you are joining us online on this beautiful fall day, it's a little chilly out there. It's an honor to have you joining us online as well. We are in part 9 of a however many part series, we don't know that yet, called Made for More. I just keep coming across more. But anyway, so we have been looking at the life and times of Joseph back in the book of Genesis. The title of today's message is called The Bros and Joes. Now, when it comes to family dysfunction, you don't have to look any further than the Bible to find it. There are plenty of examples. Our story weeks ago started with Joseph, the favorite son out of 12 sons. 10 of them are older than he is. His dad pampered him. His dad spoiled him. His dad would send him out to check on the older brothers when they were working, and he would come back and snitch on them and tattle on them. And they loved him for that. Not so much. They hated him for that. And then at 17 years old, he has this dream. And he shares it with them. And in his dream, in essence, they all end up bowing down to him. So if you think they hated him before the dream, they hated him on steroids after the dream. They hated him so much they faked his death, and they sold him into slavery in Egypt. Well, it was a caravan headed to Egypt. They didn't know where it was going. Anyway, but he became a slave and a prisoner in Egypt. He was 17 years old when the story starts. He is now 30 years old. And he has spent the last 10 plus years of his life as a slave and then a prisoner in Egypt. But now he's 30, and he's used his spiritual gift of dream interpretation to land him in Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh presents this dream to him, and Joseph interprets the dream, which leads him to this quote-unquote, what I call a dream job. He goes from being a prisoner that morning to being the second in command in all of Egypt by the end of that day. He's the number 2 guy under Pharaoh only. Okay. That's where we ended up a couple weeks ago. 7 years have now gone by. 7 years of unparalleled prosperity in Egypt, which Joseph told Pharaoh was going to happen. So that has happened, and Joseph has been capitalizing on this by storing up crops in preparation for the next 7 years, which is going to be unheard of famine. It's going to be so bad that people are going to forget how good things were. Okay? That's how bad the famine's going to be. In the meantime, he's had 2 sons. One of the sons' name is Manasseh. And the name Manasseh means one that makes to forget. One that makes to forget. I'm in Genesis chapter 41, and I'm going to read verse 50 and 51. During this time, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. Obviously, up to this point, there's still something in there regarding his family. So he has that first son named Manasseh. He then has a second son named Ephraim, which means doubly fruitful. Not fruity, fruitful. Doubly fruitful. Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. How many of you would agree with me that the past is a powerful thing? Now, can we control what it does to us? Yeah. Yep. We can make choices. We can make decisions. We can either choose to live in the past. We can either choose to allow our past to dictate our future. Or we can say, no more. It stops here. I'm not going to abide by all that stuff. So that's kind of where Joseph is at that point. But I love that first name, Manasseh, when he says, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone, not everything, but everyone in my father's family. Okay, verse 53, 54. In essence, the prosperity years are now over. It's been a great run. He's racked up all kinds of food that he's stored for the nation, but the good times are officially over and the famine begins. Joseph is now 37 years old. Now, here's something you got to remember. The famine is not just limited to Egypt. It's the whole area surrounding Egypt as well. The surrounding countries. But here's the problem. Nobody else knew what Joseph knew. So nobody else has been preparing for a famine. Egypt is the only one. Joseph is the only one. So he's got all this food stored up, all this grain stored up. And in verse 55 through 57, it says, eventually, however, the famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. So with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. And people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world. Okay. This is not a handout. Did you get that? People came to Egypt to what? Buy grain. In other words, Joseph's preparation is not everybody else's free ride or a handout. And if you think that the free ride and the handout philosophy is biblical, I would suggest you read the parable about the 10 virgins at some point in time. Jesus told the story, and he basically says there were 10 virgins. They were all invited to a wedding, and 5 of them prepared. 5 of them didn't prepare. So when the 5 that didn't prepare ran out of oil in their lights, they came to the 5 that had prepared, and guess what the 5 that prepared gave them? Nothing. Well, that's not very Christian. No, they all had that equal opportunity, right? They all knew exactly what they needed to do. 5 chose to do it, 5 ignored it. So, the Bible is clear when it comes to taking our own responsibility and being prepared. And here's one of those situations. People came to Egypt to buy grain. That lands us in chapter 42. And I've got to tell you, I have read this week and I have laughed. And maybe you will too, maybe you won't. Verse 1. When Jacob, who's the father of all the brothers in Joseph, when Jacob heard that grain was available in Egypt, he said to his sons, why are you standing around looking at each other? Does that strike you funny? Why are you standing around looking at one another? I've heard there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy enough grain to keep us alive. Otherwise, we'll die. To me, that's just comedy. That is just funny. Why y'all stand around looking at each other? We're starving to death here. There's grain over in Egypt. So, long story short, the 10 older brothers go. Dad is not letting Benjamin, the baby boy, Joseph's real brother, he's not letting him out of the house. He's keeping him home. Sends the 10 other older brothers. And just to keep in mind, Benjamin is Joseph's only full brother. The only one. And he's the baby of the group. So the 10 brothers arrive in Egypt. And we discover that Joseph, who is the second in command, is obviously very hands-on when it comes to the grain distribution. Verse 6. Since Joseph was governor of all Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was to him that his brothers came. When they arrived, here it comes, Dwayne, they bowed before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph recognized his brothers instantly, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where are you from? He demanded. From the land of Canaan, they replied. We've come to buy food. Okay. So finally, after all these weeks, the interpretation of the dream, you can call it prophetic, you can call it whatever you want, it finally comes true. The brothers show up and they bow down in front of Joseph. Story or the prophecy has been fulfilled. But is the story over? No. Far from it. Here's what I want to say about that. When God shows you something and it comes to pass, it's not over. Maybe somebody's prophesied over you before. And maybe whatever that thing was came to pass and happened. It's not over. You just don't lay down and die at that point. You keep on going. You were made for more. There is no expiration date on made for more. More just keeps becoming more. Well, I've gotten here. Yeah, but there's more. Yeah, well, now I've accomplished that. Yeah, but there's still more. Okay, so these guys have bowed down in front of Joseph, and he recognizes them. But here's not what happens. Joseph didn't reveal himself while they're bowing in front of him and say, I told you this is what was going to happen. Remember? Remember 20 years ago? I told you this is what's going to happen. He didn't do that. He did not do that. They bow before him and do not recognize him. Now you got to think through this. 20 years have passed. Why does he recognize them and they don't recognize him? 20 years have passed since the last time they saw Joseph. But think about it. Egyptians look different than Hebrew shepherds. Think of all the movies you've watched down through the years, especially for the Egyptians that are in high positions. They dress differently. The ones I've seen generally had on some kind of makeup. Their haircut is different. They just look entirely different. Now, Joseph has been gone for 20 years. He's obviously learned how to speak fluent Egyptian, so he's not speaking their native tongue. However, he understands everything they're saying. So they don't recognize him. He carries himself differently. He looks different. He's got on different clothes, different hairstyle. He's just different. It's changed. Now, I want you to think about this. The last time Joseph saw these brothers, what was happening?
They threw him in a pit.
Threw him in a pit? Pulled him out and sold him. Why let him die if there's money to be made, right? Okay? In all reality, what do you think he is feeling at this point? What do you think he's feeling? Oh, it's so good to see my brothers.
Anchor.
I don't know.
Maybe this is time for me to kind of get even.
Yes. Could be a little payback going on there. You just, But it's important to ask yourself that. What is he thinking and what is he feeling? If we blow through Bible stories and never stop to ask the human questions that we all experience and deal with, we miss what's really going on. Because you may have Joseph in some big godlike, he's a godly man. We're going to see just how godly he is in a few minutes. Because last time he sees these 10 guys, they're going to kill him, and they ended up selling him. So it could be that it crossed his mind, I wonder if they've changed. I wonder if they're still like they always were, that hating, lying bunch of brothers from 20 years ago. So what we're going to discover is he's going to mess with them and see if they've changed. Now you got to remember something else. His brother Benjamin is not with them. I would think it might go through his mind. It doesn't say this. But if I'm Joseph, it might go through my mind, I wonder if they've done the same thing to him they did to me. I wonder if they've made his life miserable. Because Benjamin's mama was the same mama that Joseph had, and that was the mama that was the favorite wife of Jacob. All the other boys have different mamas. Okay? So Joseph does this. He recognizes them, and he said to them, "You're spies. You've come to see how vulnerable our land has become." "No, my lord," they exclaimed, "your servants have simply come to buy food. We are all brothers, members of the same family. We are honest men, sir. We are not spies." Okay, mistake number one. Strike number one. We're honest men. If I'm Joseph, I'm thinking, I don't think so. You weren't honest last time I saw you. So you might think, well, he's going to back down. There's no backing down. There is no backing down. He says, "Yes, you are. You have come to see how vulnerable our land is." "Sir," they said, "there are actually 12 of us. We, your servants, are all brothers, sons of a man living in the land of Canaan. Our youngest brother, Benjamin, is back there with our father right now, and one of our brothers is no longer with us." And Joseph's probably thinking, oh, yes, he is. But Joseph insisted, "As I said, you are spies. This is how I will test your story." In other words, talk is cheap. They've talked themselves into a hole now. But he discovers, if they're telling the truth, that his father and brother Benjamin are still alive. So he lays out the ground rules. And here's what he says he's going to do. "One of you must go get your brother. I'll keep the rest of you here in prison. Then we'll find out whether or not your story's true. By the life of Pharaoh, if it turns out that you don't have a younger brother, then I'll know you were spies." So what does he do? He puts all 10 of them in prison for 3 days. Just, you guys need to chill out, rethink your story. We'll come back and talk about it in 3 days. So, that's how he tests their story. Verse 19. "If you're really honest men, choose one of your brothers to remain in prison. The rest of you may go home with grain for your starving families, but you must bring your youngest brother back to me. This will prove that you are telling the truth, and you will not die." To this they agreed. Okay, now they start talking amongst themselves. Verse 21. "Speaking among themselves, they said, 'Clearly, we are being punished because of,' ding, 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 'what we did to Joseph long ago. We saw his anguish when he pleaded for his life, but we wouldn't listen. That's why we're in this trouble. And then one of the brothers says, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? Yeah, right. But you wouldn't listen, and now we have to answer for his blood. Verse 23, this is very important. Of course, they didn't know that Joseph understood them. So he's listening in. Now he turned away from them and began to weep. So finally these guys start connecting the dots. Maybe we're in the jam we're in because of what we did to Joseph. Do you ever find yourself doing that when you end up in a bad situation? Trying to figure out, why is this happening to me? Where did this originate? Is it something I've done? Is God getting back at me for something I've done? You ever do that? Is God punishing me? Well, that's what they started thinking, and they start confessing, this is why this is happening to us. So Joseph can hear and understand them, and he begins realizing that they are taking some ownership of their sin and are possibly having a change of heart. And it's interesting from my perspective how that happens when we come to the end of ourselves. These guys are obviously out of control. You're in Egypt. You're not at home. You're in Egypt. And whatever this guy says is what's going to happen to you. And all of a sudden they realize they're at the end of themselves, and all of a sudden some truth starts to get in there. Well, I bet we're going through this because of what we did to Joseph. So it's interesting to me how that can happen to us. All of a sudden we start looking at things and start viewing things, and we start asking ourselves, oh man, is this because of this that I did? Is God possibly punishing me? So Joseph can hear and understand them. So what he does is he pulls Simeon out. Simeon's one of the brothers, and ties him up right on the spot. And then he sets him up. Verse 25. Joseph then ordered his servants to fill the men's sacks with grain, but he also gave secret instructions to return each brother's payment at the top of his sack. He also gave them supplies for the journey home, so the brothers loaded their donkeys with the grain, headed for home. But when they stopped for the night, and one of them opened his sack to get grain for his donkey, he found his money in the top of his sack. Look, he exclaimed to the brothers, my money's been returned. It's here in my sack. Then their hearts sank. Trembling, they said to each other, what has God done to us? Tell you right now, God didn't do anything to them. Their brother Joseph did it. He's messing with them. This is payback. Pure and simple. So they get home. They tell their father everything that's happened. Of course, they're minus one brother. They get home. They tell their dad what's happened, that their money is in the sack. So it appears that they have stolen the money from Pharaoh, from Joseph, and now the only way they're going to get that brother back or get any more food is if they bring little Benjamin with them. And guess what Daddy says? Not happening. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Now, you would think, as Jacob has gotten older, that he might see the error of some of his ways as far as the way he treated Joseph and raised Joseph and turned the others against that son. Well, not really. Let's keep reading. Verse 36. Jacob exclaimed, you're robbing me of my children. Joseph is gone, Simeon's gone, and now you want to take Benjamin too. Everything is going against me. Then Reuben, who's the oldest, said to his father, you may kill my two sons. if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. I'll be responsible for him, and I promise to bring him back." But Jacob replied, "My son will not go down with you. His brother Joseph is dead, and he is all I have left. If anything should happen to him on your journey, you would send this grieving white-haired man to his grave. He is all I have left." How do you think that makes the other 10 guys feel? He's all I have left. They're sitting there looking at each other like, what are we, chopped litter? So he treats the youngest one the exact same way he treated Joseph. So partiality is still alive and well. The dysfunction is still there. And what is amazing to me, this would have been the prime opportunity for them to, because they've already had a moment where they were honest with each other, but they still don't tell their father about Joseph. Because he's already brought him up. Joseph is gone. Joseph is gone. His brother Joseph is dead. Do they correct him? No. Do they say, well, you know, about that, there's something we forgot to tell you 20-some years ago. No, but they don't do that. They did not come clean. So now we end up chapter 43. And I have it in my notes. Jacob, who's the father, treats these boys like idiots. But the famine continued to ravage the land of Canaan. When the grain they had brought from Egypt was almost gone, Joseph said to his sons, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah, who's one of the sons, said, "The man was serious when he warned us. You won't see my face again until your brother's with you. If you send Benjamin with us, we'll go down and buy more food. But if you don't let Benjamin go, we're not going either. Remember, the man said, you won't see my face again unless your brother is with you." Verse 6. "Why were you so cruel to me?" Jacob, the father, moaned. Why'd you tell him you had another brother? You moron. Why did you tell him you had another brother? Can you hear a father saying that to a son? Why are you volunteering this kind of information? Now he wants that one too. The man kept asking us questions about our family. He asked, "Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?" So we answered his questions. How could we know? He would say, "Bring your brother down here." Bottom line is, Jacob finally gives in and gives them instructions to take gifts and double the money. Since it looks like they stole the money and came back with it, he says, now we got to double it so it doesn't appear that we stole anything. What amazes me is these guys, these 10 guys, never have any creative ideas on their own. These aren't teenage guys. They're in their 40s and 50s by this point in time. And Daddy is telling them every single move to make. They never think that far ahead. And on top of it, they told Joseph they had another brother. And their father just can't understand it. So they get back to Egypt. They arrive. Joseph sees his brother Benjamin, and he invites them to lunch in his house, but they don't know that there's lunch involved. They're being taken into his house, and they are terrified. They don't know what's going to happen. I mean, last time they ended up spending 3 days in prison. We don't know what's going to happen this time. Verse 19. The brothers approached the manager of Joseph's household and spoke to him at the entrance to the palace. "Sir," they said, "we came to Egypt once before to buy food. But as we were returning home, we stopped for the night and opened our sacks. Then we discovered that each man's money, the exact amount paid, was in the top of his sack. Here it is. We brought it back with us. We also have additional money to buy more food. We have no idea who put our money in our sacks. So the manager says, relax. Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, must have put this treasure into your sacks. I know I received your payment. Then he released Simeon. Simeon's the one they kept there in prison, and brought him out to them. So then they bring him into Joseph's palace, into his home. But I want to stop there for a second. I want to look at a couple things. These brothers had been bound together for years by a secret sin. They all have the same secret, same sin. And as a result, it has blinded them. This secret sin has blinded them. Just the way the story reads, these guys are totally non-creative. Daddy is still telling them it's like, okay, if we're running out of food, maybe we could think we need to go to Egypt and get some grain. But no, Dad's the one telling them. Totally non-creative. In addition to their blindness they are blind to their brother Joseph, which is amazing. Here's the point I want to make for us, 21st century. Unconfessed, unrepentant sin keeps you blind, stuck, and stupid. Sin makes you what? Stupid. Sin makes you stupid. It just does. You look back, everybody that gets caught doing something they shouldn't do that's sinful, they were convinced they were not going to get caught. Sin makes you stupid. Unconfessed, unrepentant sin makes you blind, stuck, and stupid. Now, it is easy for us to focus on Joseph as the made-for-more character in the story. Do you think the brothers are made for more? How many think yes? Okay. Let me give you a quick example, just as a little sidetrack. Levi is one of the brothers. Levi is the great-grandfather of Aaron and Moses. Levi is the tribe that every priest in Israel came from. God's orders. How's that for being made for more? Same Levi. When you hear that word, the Levitical order or the Levitical priest, the first part of that is Levi. That's who and what they're talking about. So yes, these brothers are made from more as well. And you can't forget when it comes to Joseph that he comes from a long line of deceivers. His father Jacob deceived his father. Remember that? Remember Jacob and Esau? This is that Jacob. The one that lied and cheated his brother out of his birthright, and that lied and cheated to his father Isaac. Same Jacob. And now, so you got Jacob deceiving his father. You got the 10 brothers deceiving their father when it comes to what they did to Joseph. And now you got Joseph deceiving all of them. I'm not saying it's in the DNA, but it's there. It's large and in charge. I am not going to read chapter 44. Let me give you the cliff notes of it. When his brothers are ready to leave, Joseph gave these instructions to his palace manager. So the manager gets instructions again. Fill each other's sacks with as much grain as they can carry. Put each man's money back in his sack. Then put my personal silver cup at the top of the youngest brother's sack, along with the money for his grain. put my own special water bottle, so you can relate, in the top of Benjamin's sack. So that's what the manager does. The guys get their grain, he loads them down, they take off, and then at a point in time, Joseph sends his people after them. They show up, say, one of you guys has stolen Joseph's silver cup. Ha! We didn't take Joseph's cup. What are we going to do with the silver cup? There's no way we did this. What are you talking about? The brothers responded. Didn't we return the money we found in our sacks? Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? Here's the kicker. If you find his cup with any of us, let that man die. And all the rest of us will be your slaves. That's pretty confident. Again, sin makes you stupid. They should be remembering, well, we ended up with money in our bags before. Is it possible? So sure enough, they start with the oldest guy, and they're ripping open the sacks, ripping them open, ripping it open. They get to little Benji's sack, and guess what? There's the silver cup. Wow. So they get back, and now Judah, the brother, is making a play for his younger brother. So he goes through this long, long dialogue with Joseph that basically ends up, verse 33, please, my Lord, let me stay here as a slave instead of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. For how can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I couldn't bear to see the anguish this would cause my father. Now, just a little aside, you can make out of this whatever you want to. This is Judah. Jesus is of the tribe of what? Judah. Judah is willing to stand in so his little brother can be free. Isn't that interesting? I'm not going to make a doctrine out of it, but I just thought it's a very interesting piece of the story, knowing that that's exactly what Jesus did. He sacrificed himself so that we can be free. Chapter 45. Joseph could not stand it any longer. Rooms full of people. He sends them all out. Out, all of you. So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. Of Joseph, he said to his brothers, is my father still alive? But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them. Please come closer. I'm thinking, I don't want to get within striking distance. I don't know if Joseph has a knife or a sword or anything. Just because he's revealing himself as our brother doesn't mean we're in his good graces at this point, does it? No. It's the big reveal. Please come closer. I'm Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. Verse 5. But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. This famine has ravaged the land for 2 years. It'll last 5 more years, and there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God has sent me ahead of you to keep you, and your families alive, and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace and the government of Egypt. It was God. It was God. He sent me here to preserve your lives, to keep you and your families alive. It was God, not you. Made for More is about God's plans and God's purposes. When did Joseph actually realize all of this? I think he realized it right now. I think at that point, he realized it. I don't think that's what he had been thinking all along. I think it finally came to him at that moment. And the story wasn't over the first time they bowed down to him. And they bowed down a couple more times in the meantime. That wasn't the end of the story. When does Joseph restore the relationship? Is it based on their need or based on their repentance and their contrition for being sorry for what they've done? It was based on them being sorry for what they had done. How often do we approach God with our need, but our relationship is really what's broken and needs to be restored? Man, we're praying up a storm, kind of like a checklist. God, I need this. I need 2 or 3 of these. I need this. Oh, yeah, and heal this one. Yeah. And I need favor over here. Yeah, I need that. I need that. But in the meantime, our relationship is what's broken and needs to be restored. And is God more interested in supplying needs or relationship? Relationship. So all of a sudden, there's the big reveal. They discover their brother Joseph is alive and is in charge. And he gives them instructions, and we'll probably head that direction next week. But here's what I want you to think about for a second. When it comes to being made for more. Joseph single-handedly saved the nation of Egypt. Agreed? Joseph saved the nation of Egypt that would eventually enslave his family and the people of God for over 400 years. Isn't that interesting? He saved that nation. And at a point in time, they turned and made them slaves. What I want to say is there is no end to more in Made for More. It doesn't stop. Whatever it is that you're involved in now, you don't know how that's going to end up. You don't know how that's going to play out. You don't know what's going to develop from that point on. Do we make plans? Yes. Anybody ever made a plan and it didn't actually work out that way? A few times maybe? Yeah. Every day. Yes. Made for More never ends. You never get to the end of that. Because when you think you've gotten there, there's going to be more. Especially when it's God's plan. It's not over until, just scratch out the until. It's just not over. It's not over. Period. Let's see, my notes here say read verse 12 through 15. 12 through 15. Then Joseph added, "Look, you can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin." Maybe he had a birthmark, I don't know. "That I'm really Joseph. Go tell my father of my honored position here in Egypt. Describe for him everything you have seen, and then bring my father here quickly." Weeping with joy, he embraced Benjamin, and Benjamin did the same. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers and wept over them, and after that, they began talking freely with him. It doesn't matter if it's in the story of Joseph, if it's in the story of Jacob and Esau, or if it's in our stories today. Forgiveness brings restoration. Forgiveness brings restoration and reconciliation. And from that point, a nation was able to begin to develop and grow. Because Joseph was made for more. Even Jacob, however old he was at this point in time, he was still made for more than what he had accomplished at that point. And trust me, those 10 brothers, they were made for more than selling a brother into slavery. There needed to be more to their life than that. Forgiveness. If you're hanging on to something, some unforgiveness towards somebody, I can tell you right now, you may think you have every right to, but it's doing a lot more damage to you than the person that you think you're holding it against. Your unforgiveness to somebody else hurts you because you're the one tied to it. You're the one in bondage to it. If there is that situation in your life, you need freedom. Forgive. What if the person's dead? Well, forgive them. Well, I can't go. Well, forgive them anyway. Can't do anything about it anyway. Forgive them. Forgive. That brings restoration. That brings reconciliation. And from there, you can begin to grow. You can begin to develop. And there is a made for more that comes as a result of that. Amen? Amen. Father in heaven, thank you for your word. Thank you for the story of Joseph and his brothers. And thank you for not sugarcoating these stories in your word. That these are real people with real feelings, real sin, real pain, real anger, just like we are today. And yet, just like us today, they found ways to forgive. They realized they were made for more. And we can find ways to forgive today, especially when we realize what you have forgiven us for. And that you have reconciled us to yourself. And we can continue to develop and grow. Bless this congregation of people, Father. Use them for your glory. Use their stories, their life stories, for your glory as they share you through their lives with the people they come in contact with. In Jesus' name, amen. 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 That's the Bros at Joe's this week. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for joining us online. We should be back here next week. Have an awesome week. I don't know if it's going to be spring or fall this week. It's supposed to be a little chilly. So have a great week. God bless you.